What's up, creatures? It's been a little bit since I've been on here to do a review, and I'm going to review a book for you tonight. The Last House on Needless Street. And I'll talk about that in just a second. I wanted to pick a book for the spooky season that would be a little bit of fun and maybe a little bit different for me. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, so I looked around and I watched a few reviews that were non-spoiler, and I read a little bit on Goodreads, and I decided to pick up The Last House on Needless Street. I know this book has had quite a bit of buzz on the net and in BookTube quite often. And a lot of people have talked very positively about it. For the most part, I think so. And it's by Katrina Ward or Catriona Ward. I'm not quite sure how to say the first name. It's either a strange spelling of Katrina or it's Catriona. I think Catriona would be more fitting, considering some of the principal characters. I wanted to read this book because it just had this interesting feel to it. I looked at various covers, and sometimes that draws me in. And the cover that I particularly got from the library had the sort of the greenish blue, ghostly colored house with the silhouette of the cat looking at it. And I'll probably have that like somewhere in here at some point in the video. But I picked this book up with a lot of expectation. And I have to say that I did indeed enjoy the book. It was compassionately written. It had a whole lot of good things going for it. Now, there are a few things that I want to address that I'm not real sure about, and I'm going to keep this completely spoiler-free. The first thing that I wanted to say about the book is that I feel like that Miss Ward was able to portray characters in a very compassionate way. I think she did an excellent job with that. I was intrigued by the characters. I liked the characters. I was fascinated by their problems and their complexities and all of that. I went right along with the story, and I enjoyed what was on paper for me to read. I liked some of the symbolism that she had there, and I liked some of the metaphors that she used, but the thing that truly got me, that probably takes it to the area of a little bit of negativity for me, is simply, I think it was a little heavy-handed. Now, this is just me, and so I don't want this to come off as a criticism, because if you love the book and it's your favorite book of all time, absolutely more power to you. But I ended up giving it 3 stars because, frankly, I figured out what was going on within the first fourth of the book. Prior to that even, I'm like, oh, this is what's happening. I see what's going on here. Now, it was well done, but it comes down in the end that I really, let's just say without getting into too many spoilers, that I wanted it to be a little bit more surprising. And I was kind of hoping for some supernatural elements in a different way. I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want to spoil it for anyone. It's hard to talk about a book like this without spoiling it. It truly is. As a matter of fact, at the end of the video, I may have a spoiler section with plenty of warnings ahead of time. So, as I began this journey, I read the book and I just pretty much immediately figured out what was going on. And after that, it was more of a journey of how is this going to come about? Some of the concepts that are in the book are very interesting. Some of them are a bit cliche and have been done many, many times. Some of them are sort of unbelievable. When I look at what some of the characters choose to do, I'm like, I'm not real sure characters would choose to do that in that same situation. However, we all love horror movies, and we love to watch people make bad choices. I think most of you are probably familiar with a commercial for, I think it's some insurance, that's where the guys are all considering hiding in this shed that has all the chainsaws and tools. And one girl says, well, why don't we just get in the running car and leave? And the other one's like, are you crazy? Let's hide in the garage with all the chainsaws and tools. And everybody runs over there, and the killer then is like, it's a very funny commercial and I enjoy it. But the thing about it is it's super predictable and it's almost tongue-in-cheek. But this book is not intended to be tongue-in-cheek. It's intended to be very serious. And it is a very serious subject matter, but I just wasn't surprised by it. Now, that doesn't mean anything. My wife tells me I spoil everything because I figure things out ahead of time. That's just in my nature. I can't help it. I think it's because I've read so much and watched so many films that I figured that out. And it's not a boast. It's just how it is. I break it down in my head, and I've been asked by several people, can't you just watch something for enjoyment? And I'm like, this is my enjoyment. I like to break it down and see what I can figure out is going on. I remember watching The Sixth Sense. My wife had seen it, and I had not got to see it, and she wanted me to watch it. And I had figured out what was going on basically in the first 10, 15 minutes of the movie. And she was like, how did you know? And I'm like, well, and I gave her a whole bunch of reasons. But this is not a movie analyst here. This is not a movie criticism. This is a criticism of a book. And so in much the same way that The Sixth Sense struck me, this book struck me that way. I figured out what was going on really early. And I kind of hate it when that happens because I really want to be taken along on the adventure and on that path of discovery. And so I think for me, The Last House on Needless Street gets that solid 3 stars for the beautiful writing and the eloquent prose. But it drops those 2 stars out of a 5-star category and even out of a 4-star category because it just doesn't push the envelope with me. I don't know if you've encountered books like that, but I bet you have. I bet you've been reading books and you've said, I know what's going on here. And it kind of takes some of the fun out of it. However, I still enjoyed it and I would recommend it to many people. Because I think a lot of folks really get a lot out of it. I've seen a couple of negative criticisms, and my criticism isn't necessarily negative. It's just, it wasn't really what I wanted. Now, what am I reading? I'm beginning to read a whole lot of other things, and I've read a tremendous amount since my last video, but I have decided to go and do Dracula as a read-along with Reading This Life. And so I'll link that channel down below, and I'm hoping that I can participate in that. I started it a few days ago. I have a beautiful edition of it, and it is quite the classic, and I'm a huge vampire fan. So I thought I would read that and enjoy that. I come from a classical literature background, and I have a lot of things under my belt that I've read, and it just is great sometimes to return to the oldies but goodies. And I'm just fascinated by how that book is put together as an epistolary and just the beauty of it. And so I think that will be my next read. I probably won't do a review for it, but I'm trying to decide in which direction to go next. I don't know whether to read fantasy or horror or science fiction or just plain weird fiction. I read a lot of different things, but sometimes I need a palate cleanser to make me change a little bit. I read several books at once, but I like them all to be kind of different. I usually read like a fantasy, a science fiction, and a horror book, and maybe something else at the same time. So I try not to read 2 horror books at the same time. But I don't know how you break down your reading habits, but that's how I do it. And I hope that you have enjoyed this short review. And I'm going to step now into some spoilers. Warning in 3, 2, 1, okay. All right, The Last House on Needless Street spoilers. First off, I think that the fact that we realize that our main character is suffering from what used to be called a multiple personality disorder, and that he is all of the characters, I think that is pretty done to death in films and in books and in many different things. He also suffers from a traumatic experience with a really wicked and evil mother, and I think we've seen that done to death as well. And so it's kind of cliche. It's well done. It's beautifully written, but it's nothing I haven't seen before. It didn't take me to a new place, which is pretty difficult to do. I admit it's hard to do that. And it's harder to do it when you have been exposed to as much stuff. And the longer you live and the more you read and the more you watch, I think this happens to you more and more and more. So I can forgive that. It still certainly was an interesting read. But there is one part about it that makes me just want to put my head into the wall, because I'm thinking, what what person is the character of the sister, Dee, when she decides that she's going to go over to this man's house, who she pretty much in her heart absolutely knows is the killer of her little sister and is probably a serial murderer. She just is okay with that. She's okay with telling him that she's going to meet him for a date, which she doesn't do. She's okay to go over to his house. She's okay to somehow extend her time with him and has to use the restroom. She even at one point breaks into his house to look around. It's just crazy. I don't think anybody would, in their right mind, I don't care how grief-stricken you are, even how out for revenge you might be, would put yourself in jeopardy like that all by yourself. I know I wouldn't. If I knew there was a serial killer next door, I certainly wouldn't go to his house and ask to stay longer. Maybe that's too harsh. I don't know. Maybe just the portrayal of her grief is something that's really difficult to handle. I did feel really bad for her because I'm sure she felt responsible for her sister's death in some way, even though as it comes out in the end, we find out she's not really responsible. She's just a kid when this sort of thing happens. She's just young, and other factors were in play. The real villain in this movie is the mom. In the book is the mom. She is not even really there anymore, but in flashbacks and in parts of a personality, she's the true monster. And so I do like the way it twisted around at the end, where a lot of people think that the man is the killer, and I, for some reason, can't remember his name right now, but it turns out that it's the mom. And I thought that was brilliantly done, even though I kind of saw that coming too. All in all, it was a fun read. It was great for the spooky season, and I did enjoy it. Let me know what you think if you've read The Last House on Needless Street. Leave a comment down below. You know, if you haven't, I'd appreciate it if you would like and subscribe. I'm here just to talk about books with people. I'm thinking of expanding things and moving forward, and I'm trying to make several videos and get on a regular schedule. I've been very sporadic, and that's bad on me. Thanks so much for taking the time. Have a good evening. Be kind to each other. See you next time.